All right, let's talk about the ups and downs of GHOSTWIRE Tokyo. There are some really good things about this game. It's I always really appreciate when a game really swings for the fences and tries to do something really unique. You know, there are some games that just really go outside of the box and just do everything their own way. Some of them are masterpieces like BioShock, and some of them are absolute duds like Slitterhead. This is somewhere in the middle of that. I think it's always an immense challenge to do something like that, because honestly, what a lot of gamers, including myself, find to be the most satisfying is often what is the most comfortable. And so, you know, I recognize that that's a challenge that gamers have to deal with. It's like that we want something unique and fresh, but we also know that we really just like the things that we already are comfortable with. So I really appreciate it when a game really goes for it. It's like, we're going to make something, like, we're not even like, when they just sit down at the table with this game, they're probably like, okay, what would be a super cool idea? Forget about video games and every convention for a minute. Let's just figure everything out from scratch. You know? I feel like they did this with this game, and I really, really appreciate that kind of a thing. The combat, it's not entirely unique. I've seen magic first-person combat before in a few games, but it's got with the whole Japanese ghost hunting thing. It's never really been done before, and I really, really like that. The graphics themselves weren't that good for 2022, but the art design was really interesting. Especially the enemy design was really cool, and some of the set pieces with some of the visuals, like some of the weird trippy shit that you see, was all really imaginative and well done. The enemy designs were really, really cool. Some of them got a little bit repetitive, but for the most part, they were very cool. There was some really interesting stuff with upgrading, like the skill tree was pretty legit. Sometimes skill trees, it's like, I could not put any points into any of these and it'd probably be fine. But these were like, you really got some things of value, at least for some of it. So I like the skill tree. I think the combat was okay, given the fact that they were doing something totally new. But this is where the problems start to begin for me with this game. But actually, before we get into that, one other thing I will say that's positive. I think that they did a good job of filling the open world with things to do that were unique and interesting. The gameplay loop was actually pretty satisfying for a while. It did start to drag a little bit, because a lot of what drives that gameplay loop is the combat. There's not a lot of puzzle solving in this game. There's not really a lot of like difficult platforming or anything like that. It's really driven by the combat challenges, and the combat gets pretty repetitive after a few hours. At first it's unique and it's novel and it's interesting and it's compelling and it's engaging and yada yada yada, but after a few hours of blasting people with your fingers, it starts to get pretty repetitive, and that's, I think, where the problem started. The gameplay loop got pretty boring in the second half of the game. So I think that was really the engine that really got me like going like, all right, let's just get through this. And what evidently made most people just give up on the game, because I noticed when I was getting the final achievements for completing chapters and stuff, it was only like 7-8% of people have gotten this far. This game's been out for years at this point, so the fact that only 7-6% or something saw the end, that's telling. You know, that's not something I see very often when I play a popular game that's been out for a while. Those achievements aren't usually the rare type, you know? So I'm not alone, obviously, in thinking that this game just gets to be quite old after a while. It's not the open world stuff. There's the stuff that's in the open world is interesting. It's just the fact that in order to do almost anything in the open world, you have to fight, and you have to, and the fights, it's like every time I was just running by stuff at the end, because it's like, I just don't want to deal with it, and it's not really worth the XP, because you can get just as much XP, actually quite a bit more XP, by actively avoiding fights and just interacting with other things in the world, like doing your little ghost shopping stuff, and you can get easy XP just avoiding fights in this game. So the fighting just isn't worth the rewards, and it's not that much fun after a while. It was for a while, but it got old pretty fast. Further to the combat, a big problem that I think is evident with this game is that the boss fights are fucking easy, man. I'm not the braggart type. I'm usually ashamed of my death counts in games. I only died 10 times in this game, and 8 of those were probably because I wasn't paying attention. Maybe one of those was to a boss. All of the bosses were absolute cakewalk. I mean, I was under level. I had to have been under leveled when I beat the game because I wasn't doing any of the side stuff, and hadn't unlocked hardly anything, and I was just with my basic attacks just blowing through the game, blowing through boss fights. I mean, I played on normal difficulty. There are harder difficulties, but I've got a pretty good feel these days for how hard normal should be, and this is too easy. Normal is too easy. So, if you're looking for a challenge, do not play this game on normal. So that was an issue, and the boss fights were interesting and imaginative, and they were cool build up and all that, but the actual challenge wasn't there. The actual fights were, again, pretty repetitive. You had to do basically the same things. They find different ways to tweak it with each boss, but you're basically doing the same thing with each boss, and it's pretty boring. I wasn't really that engaged with the boss fights. We talked about the graphics. The graphics aren't very good, but that's okay. The art design made up for that. The only other thing I'll say is that the story, and I was musing about this when I was playing the game. It's definitely got like an Eastern feel to it. Not necessarily the way it looks, but like the way it's edited. I've played several games like this now that are like very Japanese games. They like, not only are they from Japan, but they feel like they're intended for Japan, and they just happen to decide to release over here too. There's something, the way they cut the cutscenes, it really takes its time. It's very slow and plodding, whereas it seems like Western editing is a lot more urgent. And I guess we're just more impatient or something. And I'm no exception. So I'm watching the cutscenes, and it's like, okay, yeah, we're listening to a lot of story, but it's like they'll say a line, and then like the character will just stare at him for like 3 or 4 seconds, and then they'll say their line. And every cutscene is like a slow fade up from black, and then the cutscene happens, and it's a cutscene that could happen in 10 seconds, but it happens in like a minute. And then it's slow fade to black, and then slow fade up back to gameplay. It's just the way that it's edited. And this is a preference thing. It has to be. There must be people that like this. It makes me wonder if people that are used to that way feel rushed when they play certain Western games where it's like very big sense of urgency. So the editing bothered me a little bit, but I think that's more of a preference thing. All in all, I think this is a good game. I don't think it's a great game. I think it falls short of greatness, mostly because of the repetitive combat that gets pretty old. I think that was its biggest downfall, and the fact that it was just too easy. But I did enjoy it, and I'm glad I finally got to play it. I think it is a good game. I just think it falls short of greatness in a few different categories. Alright, that's it for GHOSTWIRE Tokyo. We can skip this. I imagine at this point we'll get the message where it's like, your adventure's not over. Oh good, title card. Great, even better. Last order of business, GHOSTWIRE Tokyo. It's been fun, but we are now going to delete you from our console and never play you again. Bye! Appreciate ya! Thanks a bunch.